Hi folks, my name's Doug Smith, and about 20 years ago I got into the hobby of board gaming. My brothers and I picked up a couple of old Avalon Hill games and we really started getting into it. And then a few years after that, I logged into this YouTube channel called The Dice Tower and was really inspired by the guys there to jump into the hobby and really get into it. And since then, I'm kind of known around town through work and Boy Scouts and church and different activities as the game guy. So this week I've got kind of a special occasion. I'm turning 50 years old, and a lot of times people ask me what my favorite game is. So inspired by the folks at the Dice Tower, I decided to make my own top 50 favorite games list. I don't claim this to be the best board games of all time because I've only played a few hundred and there are thousands of new games that come out every year. But for me, these are my top 50 of all the games that I've played. So number 50 on my list is a game called Imhotep. I like this game because it's pretty easy to teach. In this game, you're gathering different stones and you're building different pyramids and obelisks and monuments in ancient Egypt. It's very simple. You're loading these stones onto ships and then you're hauling them around. Got a good bit of strategy though for a simple game, but it's quick, it's good with 3 or 4 players, and it's a really easy game to jump into. So Imhotep. Number 49 is a game that I just got not too long ago called Century Spice Road. Again, this is a really easy game to get into. It's not very complex. All you're doing is trading spices along the Silk Road. And there's 4 different types of spices, and basically each one has a value. This is a deck building game, and normally I don't really like deck building games. Those are games where you have a certain deck of cards, everybody starts with the same group of cards, and you're purchasing new cards to add to your deck to make it better. And some games, that's the whole game. There's a famous game called Dominion, which, spoiler alert, is not my top 50, even though a lot of people like it. I'm really, really bad at it. But there are certain games like that the whole game is just deck building. You're trying to build your deck and score more victory points just with your deck. I like games that have a deck building component to it, but the whole game is not deck building. And that's what this game is. You're using your deck to trade spices and to upgrade from the lower value spices to the higher value spices. And then you're using those spices to claim markets or something like that. But essentially to buy victory points. And so it adds a little bit to that deck building mechanism. And again, super simple, takes like 5 minutes to learn and easy to jump into, pretty quick game. So Century Spice Road. On the other end of the spectrum, my number 48 game is a game called Roll Player. And this one tends to be a little heavier. Now, I've never been into role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. I've tried it a few times, but just never really got into it. I'm not necessarily the acting type. Maybe I'm not creative enough for that. But this game is sort of based on Dungeons & Dragons in that you're rolling to create a character, which to me was always the most fun part about Dungeons & Dragons. And you're trying to get certain traits for your character. But this is really about manipulating dice. And I'm notoriously bad at rolling dice, so typically dice games are not always friendly to me. But in this particular game, you're actually using different strategies to manipulate those dice and then using that to build your character and try to score points. And it sounds like it'd be pretty simple, but it's actually pretty thinky game. And it's a little heavy. We haven't played it that many times, but it's one that I'd like to get to the table a little more often because I really do like it. Supposedly there's an expansion for this game that makes it even better, so I'd love to try that out someday too. But that's Roll Player. Next up is another light, easy game called Rise of Augustus. And some people might be surprised when they play this that this would make my list because it's really not much more than bingo. Essentially you're drawing tokens out of a bag and then you're placing your Roman legions on different cards to try to obtain senators and to conquer different territories. But really, essentially, the mechanic of the game is just bingo. once you fill up your card with a certain number of Roman legions, you can conquer that territory, or you can bring that senator over to your side. And it's really simple, and you can get different bonuses throughout the game. But this is a great game with kids because it's really easy to pick up and play. And it's kind of fun. You're supposed to yell Ave Caesar whenever you claim a territory, so you can kind of get a little goofy with this game. But it's a really good, simple game, Rise of Augustus. Stone Age is one of my favorite games, and it's one that the first time I played it was at a board game cafe in Cleveland, Ohio. And we were just looking on the shelves. I think this game hadn't come out too far in advance of when we were there. We asked the guy working there, could you show us how to play this? And he said, actually, this is one of the only games in the whole place. They might have had 500 games. This is one of the only games I've never played. So my brother and I pulled out the rule book, and we figured it out, and we sat and played it. And when I came home, I immediately went online and ordered it. This is what's called a worker placement game. So each player has a certain number of meeples, a certain number of workers. You put them out on the board to do different tasks. One funny thing about this game is we played it wrong for a really long time. There are little tool tokens in the game that if you, like me, I said I roll dice poorly a lot of times, but you can manipulate your dice if you have tools. You can upgrade those dice and pip them up. Well, the problem was we played that tool mechanism completely wrong when we were playing it, and it made tools really overpowering, so that if you went with a tool focused strategy, you were pretty much automatically going to win the game. And my son Grady figured that out pretty quickly, and he kicked our butts at this game like every time we played it. And then we went back into the rules one time, and we realized we had been playing it wrong, and that's why it was so unbalanced. So once we started playing it right, I liked this game a lot better. I think Grady didn't like it as much after that because he didn't win all the time. But this is a really good, if you've never played a worker placement game, this is a really great place to start because it's pretty basic, but it gets you into that mechanic and helps you to understand how worker placement games work. Now, I don't play a lot of two-player games at my house. We have 6 kids, and so a lot of the games we play are bigger games, but this is a classic called Lost Cities, and it's strictly a two-player card game. And I really like this game a lot. The only reason it's not higher on my list is actually because I have the app on my phone, and it makes it so easy to play. The app makes it so easy to play that I pretty much always choose playing on the app over playing the physical board game, because you can play a game in 30 seconds or a minute. It's just so fast. I think I've probably played clearly over 1,000 times on my phone, because anytime I'm standing in line, I have downtime, I play a couple quick games of Lost Cities. It's so fast. But this is a really, really great two-player card game where you're basically playing different colors and different numbers. It's got kind of an Indiana Jones theme to it, but the theme is kind of a secondary thing. But really great card game. Next up, I can't show you the whole board, but is something called Crokinole, and this is the little score box that we have for it. But in Crokinole, the board is gigantic. It's huge. And it's a flicking game. You have these little discs, and you essentially it's kind of like tabletop shuffleboard. You're flicking these discs, and you're trying to knock your opponents out of the circle, and you have to hit your opponents. If you just shoot and miss, yours goes off the board, but you're essentially trying to get your discs near the center of the board and score more points than your opponents. And I'm not usually into dexterity games too much, but Crokinole is a really cool one, and it's a lot of fun. There's some strategy to it. There's some skill to the physical side of it. Really, really great game. This game here, Age of Mythology, is my son Levi's one of his favorites of all time. And I have to say that out of the box, this game was really bad. The rules didn't make sense. We played this game on the computer as a video game. It's a fantastic video game. One of my favorite. I don't play a lot of video games or computer games, but this is one of my top 2 computer games of all time that I love. And so when I saw there was a board game version of it, I had to get it. And the board game version, it's super cool because there's a bunch of miniatures in there, and you have the Greeks and the Norse gods, and then you have the Egyptians, so there's different factions. There's Medusa, there's all these different little dragons and things. This is one of the first games I ever had that actually had little plastic miniatures, which was pretty cool. But the rules were trash. It didn't make any sense. If you spent all your resources to move up in the technology to the next age, you would get crushed because somebody would come in and your army wasn't strong enough to protect your people. Somebody would come in and crush you. There was no help. Once you lost the battle and you got down, there was no way to recover because people could just continue to pummel you the whole time. And so in this game, we completely rewrote the rules. The way we play this game is 100% Smith household rules, and we completely redid the whole thing. And it's still got some ups and downs. The battle mechanic is dice rolling, so you can still have a good strategy and lose the game because you roll poorly. But it's so much fun. The only downside is it takes a long time. I mean, this is probably a 3-hour game at least. But we've had so much fun with it over the years. We've had some epic battles. It's really great, and this game will always stay in our collection just for the nostalgia factor more than anything, because we've had so many great experiences with it. And if you ever want the rules, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to provide our homegrown rules for Age of Mythology. The next game on the list is a game that you probably wouldn't, first of all, nobody's probably ever heard of it. I think it probably came out in the 1970s or maybe early 80s. And the game, it's an old-fashioned roll and move game, like Monopoly or Careers or Bonkers or something, where you roll the dice and you move around the board, which compared to modern board games is just, it's a terrible mechanic. But this game has so much nostalgia for me because I got it when I was a kid and I love playing it. The one really cool thing about this, so you roll the dice and essentially you are different candidates trying to be elected president. And when I was a kid, in 3rd grade, they always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I always said I wanted to be the president. So when I was a kid, this game really hit home for me. But one of the really cool things about this game is it's actually a really good way to teach kids about the Electoral College. Because in this game you compete in different regions around the United States, and you put votes into different little boxes, and you can get plus votes or minus votes, but it's not the popular vote that matters, it's the electoral vote. So you count up the popular votes in each region, and then the electoral votes are based on the regions, not on the popular votes, so it's not just pure numbers. So it's actually really cool. The other thing I like about this is there are different issues in the game. You can come out in favor of drilling in the national parks, or you can be opposed to drilling in the national parks. And once you state in public what your stance is on that issue, then there may be cards that pop up and it'll gain you points in one region and it'll lose you points in another region. So that's kind of neat because it really does a pretty good job of showing, how a campaign works. And there's mudslinger cards where you can get up on your soapbox and give a speech against your opponent and they lose votes in different regions. So it's kind of just this goofy little old-fashioned game. But it holds a huge place in my heart because I played it a lot when I was a kid. And, it was really sort of, in terms of theme, right along the lines of what I loved and what I was interested in. Alright, so last but not least, number 41 is a game called Council of Four. And this is a game that I lucked out on. I actually picked it up at Ollie's Bargain Outlet near here. I think it was like 20 bucks. But this is a game from a company called CMON. And CMON is sort of known or famous for miniatures. So I mentioned Age of Mythology, that being the first game where there were really cool little plastic miniatures. This is another cool miniatures game. But the interesting thing about this, when you take it out of the box, it looks like it would be a war game where you're battling each other and stuff. But this is completely different. It's an economic Euro game where you're actually putting out merchants and different villagers. There's an area control aspect to it because you're trying to control certain parts of the board, but you put merchants out, and when you connect those merchants into a network, it triggers different abilities that give you resources, give you money, and essentially you're trying to make the most money and become the most prestigious. But it's kind of cool because you use cards to bribe these councils of four that control the different regions. So you're bribing the politicians essentially to give you access to these markets and to be able to put your merchants out in these markets. So it's kind of cool because there's a sort of a set collection element to it. There's an engine building element. There's area control. It's got all those different things together. The one thing that I kind of don't like about this game is there are some bonuses that are involved in the game. And it seems like if you jump on the first or second bonus, the player who manages to get those first always seems to win. So I think the next time we play this game, we're going to try to eliminate those bonuses and see what that does. And that's one thing I would totally encourage you to do. If you find a game that you kind of like, but it's not just right, just like I mentioned with Age of Mythology, I tend to not scrap the game. I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm going to tweak it, and I'm going to rewrite the rules to make it better. And that's one of the fun things I really enjoy about games is you can take it and customize it and make it better and make it your own and develop basically your own game out of the components. You don't have to play it just as it is out of the box. And so we do that a lot. We house rule games a lot. So that's my number 41 through 50. Hope you enjoy, and hope you'll come back and watch another one.